have for you a cat. Because this one's gonna be a doozy. What's up, guys? My name is Moo. I'm a college student who loves reading, and I'm here to share that love with all of you. I took a 6-mile hike yesterday, and I consider myself a bit unathletic. I'll be so for real. So everything hurts right now. Ooh, but it's okay because I'm here and I'm having a great time, and I am going to bring you a book that is not an easy read by any means, but I think a necessary one. In fact, it was deemed so necessary that I had to read it for class. I really trust the professors at my school, so even more so, I believe. I really trust the professors at my school, so I very much believe that this is a book worth reading if you're into the historical time period of Germany in the 30s and 40s. I don't want to say the word right now because we are still pretty soon into the video and I don't want to make the YouTube overlords mad. But garbage man, please leave now. Garbage man, come along, I'm waiting. You make the video really loud. Please don't look at me, please don't look at me. You know, it's so silly because the garbage man never comes until I've sat down and wanted to record, because that's just Murphy's Law, but it's okay. So, the book that I am reviewing today is one that I deem very important. That book being The Shame of Survival by Ursula Malendorf. Ursula was a little girl who grew up in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. She was born in 1929 and documents her experience through that. So we are going to read the summary first, and then I will talk about my thoughts around it because it was very insightful, and I think it's so easy to get angry and deem all of these people villains. But I think that remembering that they're human almost makes it worse, because you don't want to believe humans can do the things that were done in Germany during World War II. But I'll get back into that soon. Let's read the summary first. While we now have a great number of testimonials to the horrors of the Holocaust from survivors of that dark episode of 20th century history, rare are the accounts of what growing up in Nazi Germany was like for people who were reared to think of Adolf Hitler as the savior of his country, and rarer still are the accounts written from a female perspective. Ursula Malendorf, born to a middle-class family in 1929 at the start of the Great Depression, was the daughter of a man who was a member of the SS at the time of his early death in 1935. For a long while during her childhood, she was a true believer in Nazism and a leader in the Hitler Youth herself. This is her vivid and unflinchingly honest account of her indoctrination into Nazism and of her gradual awakening to all the damage that Nazism had done to her country. It reveals why Nazism initially appealed to people from her station in life and how Nazi ideology was inculcated into young people. The book recounts the increasing hardships of life under Nazism as the war progressed and the chaos and turmoil followed Germany's defeat. In the first part of this absorbing narrative, we see young Ursula as she becomes an enthusiastic member of the Hitler Youth and then goes to a Nazi teacher training school at 15. In the second part, which traces her growing disillusionment with and anger of the Nazi leadership, we follow her story as she flees from the Russian army's advance in the spring of 1945, works for a time in a hospital caring for the wounded, returns to Sicily when it's under Polish administration, and finally is evacuated to the West, where she begins a new life and pursues her dream of becoming a teacher. In a moving epilogue, Mellendorf discloses the long trail she followed into learning how to accept and cope emotionally with the shame that haunted her from her childhood allegiance to Nazism and the self-doubts it generated. Writing from a psychoanalytically informed feminist perspective, this is sensitive to issues of race, ethnicity, gender, and social class. She hopes that her story can help educate young people about the dangers of extreme ideologies so that a phenomenon like Nazism can be seen for what it is and avoided in the future. As she says in her introduction, while it may be uplifting to study the registers, it is much more necessary to understand the perpetrators and bystanders if we want to prevent the repetition of a regime like Hitler's. That was a really long summary, but I think that it was important to understand the context. I respect Ursula Mellendorf. I didn't think I could ever say that about a person who participated in Nazism, but the world is so much less black and white as we wish it was. She says it herself in her introduction. She went from Nazism to feminism. She became an incredibly educated person. She fights vehemently against the system that she grew up in. She educates younger people. I respect how she took her childhood, which was objectively wrong. The way she grew up was wrong. She was brainwashed into it too, and that was wrong, and she turned it into a learning opportunity for people generations to come. So Ursula grew up in middle class, but her father died while she was incredibly young, and her mother had means to support herself, but not much. So they went from middle class to pretty poor, and that really hurt Ursula from a young age. She didn't have a father figure. She didn't have the nice clothing and the nice shoes that a lot of her peers had, and that really distressed her even from a young age. So when the regime came around and took over and introduced the Hitler Youth, she threw herself into it because she found a place where girls could take leadership positions, which was also something she really struggled with. She struggled with the fact that she couldn't do what boys could do. She saw this opportunity for leadership, and she just threw herself into the Hitler Youth. She became so brainwashed by the propaganda that was said that she ended up seeing Hitler as a father figure. And I think that that can be said for a lot of children at the time. Because think about it, a lot of kids, their fathers are soldiers that are off going to who knows where, who knows if they're coming back. You know, he separated these families and put everybody into a group and told them different things and exact roles for them so that he could control them. And unfortunately, for a couple years, he did succeed in that. Ursula was completely brainwashed. She saw this opportunity as fantastic, and she put her all into it. She was so happy with the nature hikes and, you know, the history lessons and being able to get an education through this program because she had nothing else. And because she had nothing else, she elevated this program and thought of it as her ticket to higher education and to a path different from motherhood, like Hitler was simultaneously teaching that women had to do. And that, I think, was so meticulous. They found the hurting points in people and they exploited them so that they would follow them, while in the background, it wasn't really that hidden, but in the background, they were murdering millions of people. Ursula says when she was a child, She had neighbors who were Jewish. She had a Jewish dentist. And one day they just disappeared. All of the Jewish people in her life just seemingly disappeared. But at the time, she thought nothing of it. In fact, the memory of those people did not surface until later in her life when she realized that these people were Jewish and they got deported from their homes in Germany. Ursula speaks of many times hearing the stories of the terrible things happening to first the communists, but then the Jews. And it just didn't register much in her head, because how could this program that's giving me these opportunities and making everyone around me so happy, how could it be a bad thing? But as we know in hindsight, this regime was one of the worst in contemporary history. This regime systematically killed millions of people in the course of 6 years. People say they didn't know, but they did. Even if they just passed them off as rumors, they knew what was happening. They heard about what was happening. And it's just difficult. In 1945, Ursula's hometown is invaded and she is forced to flee. While she flees, things come crashing down. All of a sudden, everything becomes disillusioned, and she realizes she has been brainwashed for her entire childhood, and everything she thought she had was gone in a second. When she heard Hitler had taken his life, she almost joined a pact to do the same with a group of other people her age. But at the last second, she goes, "No, I want to live," and she runs away, and she breaks the trance that everyone was in, and everyone who was going to do so survived. While being a refugee as well, along that same path that they were on, she sees emaciated people with shaved heads and striped clothing. It is pretty obvious to her that those are Jewish prisoners who had just been liberated from a camp. Once again, there is no way that they could say, "I didn't know." They knew. And Ursula and many others her age would carry that shame for the rest of their lives, knowing that they participated in a system that did those atrocious things. Ursula very intelligently and very empathetically ponders what might she have become if the regime continued. She does not hold back. She reflects that there was probably a good chance of her becoming a willing perpetrator in these horrors if she was given those orders. The Germans were fed this violent, hateful, vile propaganda, and propaganda is especially effective on children. By the end of the war, she was angry. By the end of the war, she felt like she could hurt somebody. She didn't, but there were times where she wanted to. She was angry at everyone around her. There were no good guys, not for a while. It was only until she was reunited with her mother and she was sent to West Germany as a refugee that she actually was able to find purpose outside of the Hitler Youth, outside of the propaganda she had been fed. She actually got access to an education. She went to lectures from the Allies, including plenty of Americans. She made friends with Americans. She learned English by reading novels, which I am going to take that from her, and I'm going to learn more Korean by doing so. So she did inspire me in that way. I actually bought a book in Korean so that I can translate it. But she threw herself into education, and she ended up getting to study abroad in the US, and she eventually became a professor in the US where she taught about her experience. And I think that she did the best that she could out of what she had been given, because her childhood, the things that she did and thought in her childhood were objectively wrong. That is not to be argued about. She does not excuse it in any way. She is 100% accountable of the thoughts and actions that she did as a child, even though one could argue that she was a brainwashed child and it wasn't her fault. She does not argue that. She takes full accountability and says, I was a part of this system. I am terrified to know that it was incredibly possible for me to become a perpetrator like the people that were perpetrators had I been a little bit older, had the regime survived a couple years more. And I think that is really what makes this book so good, so well done. She does not excuse a single thing, and I very much respect that, and I respect her incredibly. I have said this plenty of times, but I read a lot of Holocaust memoirs because I just feel like if you have been brave enough to write out your trauma on the page, you deserve to be listened to. But she was right in her summary. You don't prevent these things from happening by just hearing the stories of the victims. It really sucks to do, but you have to understand the why of the perpetrators in order to prevent it from ever happening again. I don't want to know why they did it. There's no rational reason to do the things that they did. There is no rational, logical reason to even hate someone based on an identity that they cannot change. There is absolutely none. But if you can understand the thought process and the thought patterns, perhaps you can prevent things like this from happening in the future. That is my take for now. Overall, I recommend this book to history lovers. I recommend this book to people interested in learning more about Nazi Germany. I mean, this offers a perspective from someone who actually worked so hard to atone for the mistakes of her country. So it definitely can make you angry, and that's incredibly valid, but I definitely think that this is a book worth reading if you are interested in World War II history in any way. I am going to leave this video here. I really debated about reviewing this book because it is such a heavy read. Actually, like up until about 10 minutes before I was going to start filming, I really was like, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I don't want to review this because it's so heavy and it takes such nuanced thought and such nuanced conversation to tackle that I don't know if I could have done that in the correct way. But I hope that I conveyed my thoughts correctly. And I hope that you can understand that explanation does not equal excuse. There is no excuse in this circumstance, but she did explain, and that is what I like a lot about this book. So I'm going to leave it here. I am finding it a little hard to breathe because of the content of this book and like having to think about it in a nuanced way, because I don't want to think about Nazi Germany in any way except for this is the most evil thing I can think of. But here we are, and I really liked this book. So if you liked this video, please like it, comment your thoughts on it, comment your perspective, and if you want to see more of this stuff, subscribe. And if you like hearing me tackle these books, tell me, because I can do more videos on these subjects if you guys would like, because I have a lot of history books that I have not yet reviewed on this channel. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here. Without further ado, this has been Moo. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.